Merci beaucoup. Eh bien, on va raconter un conte qui vient du livre de Alexandre Dumas. C'est un conte. This is from this book. Don't worry, it'll be translated. It's from a book by Alexandre Dumas. This is the book Contes et légendes des grands chemins. It's a book of all the folk stories that he collected during his travels around Europe and other parts of the world. And he collected stories from the paysans, from the people of the country, from peasants and farmers and mountain folk, and all the people that he talked to. They knew what James already mentioned, that there are some times when this world and the other worlds, they come close and the barrier between them grows thin. So they knew that sometimes encounters with these beings of the other worlds, they were not impossible. And this is a story about one of those peasant farmers who lived up in the mountains, and he knew that, and he had one of those encounters. Now, he lived up in the mountains of what's now Switzerland, in the region of the Rhine, and up on top of one of the tallest mountains in a chain there. The mountain is Mount de Tonique, and the sea, it's a large lake, so large that some people call it a sea, the Mummelsee. And this lake, at that time, nobody had ever found the bottom of it. They had no idea how deep it was. So I gave it an air of mystery. And other legends were told around the lake, too, that strange things could be seen at night or at dusk or dawn. They said that if you threw a handful of pebbles into that lake, if you threw 5 pebbles, you would only see 4 splash marks. Or if you threw 6 pebbles, you'd only see 5 splash marks. Like the lake always wanted to take something for itself. Now, this peasant, he lived not far from that lake up in the mountains, and he would hunt and fish and had a little plot of land. He was very poor, lived all by himself. And around early May, that part of the world, you can still find ice on the surface of a lot of lakes and ponds in early May sometimes. It was a very cold beginning of May. It was late at night. He's in his cabin. The wind's blowing fierce outside. And he heard a knock on his door. And the knock, it came from really low down on his door. So he opened up his door, and first he thought nobody was there, and he had to look down, and he saw this man, shortest man he had ever seen in his life, standing there holding his hat in his hand, looking up, long beard, long grizzled hair. And the man put his red hat back on his head and asked if he could have some hospitality. He said he was hungry and needed somewhere to come in out of the wind. And so the farmer brought him into just a little one-room cottage. He only had one bed, gave him half of the soup that he'd made for himself that day. And then after they had eaten, the farmer asked the little man, would you like to stay the night? I'm sorry, I only have one bed here. You can have the bed. I'll sleep on the floor, no problem. Now, the little man with the long beard, he just said, no, I can find a better place to sleep, actually. Thank you very much. And he went out the door. Now, the peasant thought that was really strange, because where else is he going to sleep? Up here in the mountains, there wasn't another house for miles around. There's no inns or taverns. And so he went to the door and peeked out, and he watched that little man with the beard walk off into the forest. And then he followed him at a safe distance to see where he went. And he saw the little man walk until he came to a little mountain spring, little pond, little mountain spring in a clearing of trees. And down where all the big gnarled roots of the trees collected around that spring, the little man kind of walked down into them, almost like he was walking down a staircase. But that can't be right. I mean, where's he going to go? And who in their right mind would go down into the roots down at the bottom of the trees in this weather? And the wind is still blowing fierce, whipping his farmer's clothes around. Well, he went back to his own cottage, but he decided he was going to go back and look for that little man the next day. So he got up before dawn, and he walked back to that mountain spring. There was a layer of ice on top of it even. And he went back, and he saw the little man with the beard walking up out of the spring again. And he walked out of those trees' roots and came towards him. He said, "Good morning, friend." And he noticed the little man, he wasn't wet. He didn't have a drop of water on him. Now he asked him, why did you sleep down there? And that's when the little man told him, I am a Nang. We would translate that as gnome. I'm one of the water people. I'm a water gnome. The water's my home. And the farmer said, well, you can eat at my house anytime you want. Of course, he, like a lot of the other peasants in the area, he knew about the gnomes. He knew that sometimes humans met them. He was a little afraid, but he got up his courage. He said, I'm at your service, sir. Can I help you with anything? And so that's when the gnome told him, I am looking for the Mummelzee. The farmer said, well, it's only a couple miles that way. It's not far from here. I can show you how to get there. But why the Mummelzee? And the gnome told him his story. He said, I come from a land far, far from here, way to the north, up where the land meets the pole. And that land is called Greenland. I was born in a lake there. Now, when I was a young man, I married an Onzine. The Onzines, some people translate that as mermaid, but they were really the female equivalent of the water gnomes. They were the spirits of the water too. And he married this Onzine, and they lived happily enough, but pretty soon she started to complain. She said she wasn't happy there. She wasn't happy in Greenland, because what she loved the most of all was to collect flowers by the edge of a lake and go sit in the fresh grass by the edge of the lake. Now, for the people who live in the water, coming out of the water onto land, well, I guess it's like for us when we go for a swim. It's a recreation, going into a new habitat. But she loved being around fresh flowers and grass, and you couldn't find that in Greenland. 9 months out of the year, everything was frozen over in that land. She said, I hate this land. I hate Greenland. And he said, but Greenland, this is my home. It's the only home I've known. I don't think I could leave this land. Now, she got sadder and sadder and more depressed, and she kept talking about wanting to go somewhere where the flowers grew more months out of the year, where she could sit among the flowers. And he thought she was just being picky. He thought he didn't take it that seriously. And he didn't notice how sad she was becoming. Until one day he went out to collect some pearls to make a necklace for his wife, the Onzine. He came back to his home at the bottom of that lake in Greenland, and she was gone. She'd made good on her promise. She'd gone looking for some other lake in some place that was closer to the sun, where the sun shone brightly. So the gnome told the farmer, ever since then, I've been traveling the earth, going from lake to lake, looking for my Onzine, looking for my wife. He told him he'd gone to the most far-off lands. He'd gone to the American continent, been to a lake called Le Lac Ontario. He'd been to the land of Syria, gone to the lake of Genesaret, and he'd been to every other lake on earth except Mummelzee. This Mummelzee at the top of this mountain in this part of Switzerland, that was the last lake left. And he said, if my wife is not in this lake, all is lost, and I don't know what will become of me. And so the farmer agreed, I can help you find the lake. And the gnome said, please, I need your help because I have trouble walking on land. For me, it's like you trying to tread water. And I have trouble seeing. I can't see very far on land either. And sure, he hobbled around on land like a little old man. But he promised the farmer, down in the water, I can see great. I can spot pearls at 1,000 yards. He explained to the farmer that in every lake, in every body of water, there are more people down below than there are up here above. There's a whole world of people who live down there in the water. But he said, it's all nothing for me if I can't have my Onzine, my wife. The farmer took him by the hand. Took several hours hiking through the mountains, and he took him to the edge of that lake of the Mummelzee. And that's where the gnome said, here's where we part ways, I guess. And I'm going into the water. There was still a thin layer of ice. They had to break the ice away with the farmer's hiking stick. And the gnome said, here goes nothing. He told him, if you wouldn't mind, if you could wait here a half hour for me. And if I find my wife, I'll stay down there. If I don't, I'll come back. And if I don't find her, I'm going to leave the water and I'll stay on land until I drown with all this air. So he watched the little gnome walk into the water, and he saw his head go down below the water, and he was gone. The farmer sat there and he waited 10, 20 minutes. And he waited 30 minutes, and he saw something coming up, rising above the water. Now his heart gave a leap. He thought, this poor little old man, he didn't find her. Now he's coming onto land to die. And he walked up to the bank of the lake, but it wasn't the gnome's head at all. It was a sack that was floating towards him, a leather sack. He pulled it out of the water, this heavy sack. He opened it up, and it was full of pearls and gems and coral from the bottom of the lake. It was a gift from that gnome. He'd found his wife down there, and he sent a gift of gratitude to that farmer. He took those pearls, he took them to Strasbourg, and he used them to buy huge pastures of land, and he became one of the richest farmers in the region. And his family, they own that land to this day. And they say not many people would see the gnome in the lake, but every now and then, if you go down there to this day at dusk or at dawn, and if you sit at the edge of the lake, sometimes you'll see them sitting at the edge of the lake, or maybe playing in the reeds or playing in the flowers. You see, for those people of the water, for them coming up here on land, that's like when we decide to go for a swim. It's refreshing and relaxing.